Aloha siblings. My name is Bill and my pronouns are he, him, and his. This video I'm going to be talking about my religion. I'll probably repeat stuff that I've said before in a few other places. I guess the obvious places are, there's a video on this channel, I think called My Religion, and on my other vlogish channel. I have some stuff that's, I think it's kind of spread over a couple of videos, but people have in the live stream and just in comments requested that I speak on various religious topics, my perspectives or perspective, and the like. I've been hesitant to, just because I feel like it's easier for me to talk about that kind of stuff on the vlogish channel, just because I do have a tendency to get kind of worked up depending on, where my head's at the moment. And that can be non-conducive for a relaxation ASMR sort of experience. But upon some consideration, I decided that I think there's plenty of things I can talk about that are fine for relaxation. Some of them will have to do with my personality and my history and things like that. I figure that's where I'll spend maybe most of this video. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I haven't really planned out like an outline or anything. I'm just sort of winging this. So, So I guess I'm going to start with my personal history insofar as attending religious services and things like that in an actual organized manner. I think, well, I guess I should back up, shouldn't I? On my other channel, I have a slogan for myself that I am the atheist, anarchist, advocating agape. And I've mentioned this before, but, there's value in repetition, right? I've said that before, too. The atheist part is just that I lack a belief in God, and I'll speak more on that today. But I'm not anti-theist. I'm not trying to, go drum up people to join my cause or some such thing. And the anarchist bit is, think of it in the really super simplified version of it is, if a monarchy is with one king, then anarchy is without any king, right? I mean, no rulers, basically. Keep looking at that, and I should be looking up there, I suppose. Yeah, so, anarchy is simply, from my perspective, in a simplified version of it, it's just without a king or without a ruler and without rulers in general. And then the last bit, advocating for agape. Agape meaning profound compassion and love for your fellow humans. Right? So the first and last, I guess, are the two things that are the most obvious as far as how they relate to my religion. And yeah, I'm an atheist, but I count myself as a religious human. I think of religion in a broad way, I guess, from an anthropological perspective, I guess. And that religion serves certain functions, right? There's a, like origin myth, that kind of thing. Like, where do we come from? Well, I guess that's the origin myth, right? The history of the people and that kind of thing. And to explain prehistory even, right? History meaning that there's some record of it that you can reference, right? That's one aspect of, when people say history as opposed to just the past. A lot of times what they mean is something that there's a record of. So in part, religion serves how we explain all of that and how we got here, and then the fact that we are here and how we interrelate with each other. And then there's various rules and laws that have to do with behavior, etc., right? I mean, and it can, of course, have to do with things like, whether or not there's an afterlife, and whether or not there's, the common thing here in the U.S. is, the Christianity is very common. For all of the complaining I hear on various news programs, I'm pretty sure Christianity is still the most common religion here in the U.S. But so we hear a lot of the Christian stories and the Christian myth and the stuff. So the idea that, there's the, the good and evil God, and, the devil, and, this conflict, and, whether or not you sin or are on the side of God, so to speak, or I guess if you sin, you're opposite that, right? But so if you sin or you're on the side of God, I guess I meant to say, and what does that fit? Can you be a sinner and then get redemption? And you know what I mean? There's all these various things. And, again, the common one that is easy to reference here in the U.S. is from, popular culture versions of Christianity that, just are easy to get references to. So, I mean, religion serves all of those purposes. And then, of course, it can be a deeply held conviction to people and all of that. And I'm not interested in measuring people's conviction and the like. Nor am I interested in trying to come up with a yardstick for my own. I kind of just view my religion as trying to make my perspective and how I understand the world kind of be in harmony with my experience of the world, right? I guess, do my beliefs and actions, etc., do they all kind of jive together, right? So that's, partially what my religion is about. So it's kind of all-encompassing about how I conceptualize the world and then therefore interact in it, and right. So it has to do with my code of conduct, and then but see, there's a lot of my behavior, all of our behaviors that are kind of conditioned. Well, they're not kind of, they are conditioned, both through enculturation around, from the people and happenings around us from the time we're a baby, until now. But then, of course, our own sort of trying to rein in our behavior by our, the ego, I, me, mine, the first person captain of the ship, so to speak, trying to, don't do that because you'll get embarrassed, or don't do that because you'll get injured, or, we try to, control our behaviors through learning things and conceptualizing things, as well as the stuff that just sort of gets trained into us. Right, so that, so I guess really what I'm trying to do is come up with, so how does that interact with my conception of myself, right? What is there meaning to those things, right? I guess that's really what it comes down to, is how am I existing? What's my experience of that existence, as well as my conception of that existence? Is there meaning to that existence? And then, of course, there's all the layers of, how we interact with each other, and, all of that kind of thing. I just tend to look at those things through a lens that is largely informed through having been a math guy at university, and, took some science classes along with that. So that, when I think of the origin myth, so to speak, of, where what I believe in is informed by that, the scientific model, or at least, to the best of my ability to understand that model and kind of make it my own, right? I'm trying to, that's the thing. Part of my thinking of the world is the fact that I model the world, right? I mean, we all do, right? We take in, vision and audio and tactile stuff, and how warm or cold is it, right? And our brain constructs this model for us so that we can interact with the world, right? We have to, like, you see things and you have an idea. We have this sense of, I can't think of the name of it, but it's the sense of where we are, right? It's like I can close my eyes and I still know, oh, my hand's up here, now it's, there, and right, you know what I mean? It's over here now, waving at you, right? I know those things even though I wasn't looking at my hand, because, right, we have that sense of stuff or whatever. Anyway, so our brains take all this information in and make this model, right, so that we can interact with the universe we find ourselves in. And so I guess part of my religion is my trying to come to understand to the best I can that model, and then what modeling that I do, what things do I do to contribute to that model, right, and my understanding of it, and then how does that affect my behaviors. I mean, I guess it's all, I don't know, some impart kind of some, I don't know, maybe I overthink things too much. So I guess after all of that battling, kind of just giving you sort of the general shotgun idea of, you know, in general, what is my religion? I think the only way I can specifically, you know, give you ideas about it is to just talk about, you know, me, my history, I know how things happen or whatever, right? So I guess on to talking about my history with, I guess I'll say organized religion, right? So my parents, I wasn't raised in any particular religious tradition. Our parents, my sister and I, were raised in a fairly secular manner. Our parents weren't anti-religion or anything like that. We just didn't go to church or anything. But having said that, I did sometimes go to church, but not with my parents. My maternal grandmother was a habitual churchgoer. And when we were children, we spent most of our vacations with our maternal grandmother. And if you stayed in grandmother's home, you went to church with grandmother on Sundays. That's, you know, kind of the way it worked. And when I was a kid, a young kid, I liked going to church. I may have mentioned this before somewhere in a different video. I'm not 100% sure. But the idea of, you know, because there was always like the nice clothes, right? You would wear, you know, as a kid, you had nice clothes, and you know, like, that were better than even your school clothes, right? So, you know, you put on your nice clothes to go to church when you're staying with Granny. And I guess when I was a kid, we called her Grandma. Granny was a name that kind of evolved when I was an adult. It doesn't matter, however we referred to. So Grandma would take us to church, but we would get dressed up, you know, the whole thing, and all your best clothes and all of that. And then so was everybody else, right? You know, my grandmother, our great aunt would often go with us. My grandfather didn't often go, almost never actually. Her children, my uncle and aunt, they were mostly out of the house as either teenagers or young adults by the time my sister and I were hanging out as kids. But they were a good several years younger than my mom. But everybody would be, you know, dressed up nice and in a good mood, and, you know, being very cheerful, and, you know, yeah, there's, you know, this fellowship thing that was, you know, a pretty cool thing, and I enjoyed that as a kid. Yeah, and, you know, I found the preaching boring, but, you know, the singing was fine, you know. I always felt a little odd because I didn't really know the songs. It always took me a minute to, you know, figure out what was going on. So that was a little weird. But, you know, for the most part, I enjoyed it as a kid. It wasn't until I started actually kind of paying attention to the preaching and realized that it didn't fit with anything that, you know, that I was even, well, it just didn't fit me at all. So by the time I was, I guess, probably junior high, I was no longer sort of required to go to church anymore. But by that time, there was a couple of things happened. So let's just say junior high, you know, because all this sort of happened, I guess, roughly about the same time. So in 8th grade, I went to Washington, D.C., and during the visit there, I ended up in conversation with some Hare Krishnas. And Anyway, the gist of the transaction between me and the Hare Krishnas is that they gave me a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, this like nice hard copy version, like, hardbound book. And I've got it somewhere. I'm not sure where. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was in the stacks of books that I did for the show and tell. But anyway, when it turns up, I will do a show and tell with it, just because the pictures in it and stuff are really, really cool. So that was one thing that was, kind of an interesting thing. And another thing that kind of goes along with that is that when I was junior high, or maybe they moved in when I was in 6th grade, something like that. These people moved in next to us, and they practiced a religion called Siddha Yoga, which is, I guess, a branch of Hinduism. I mean, I don't know. I always feel weird talking about things being a branch of Hinduism, because Hinduism is just, I don't know. It's just, it's big and complex, I guess, is all I should say. In any case, we had neighbors, and the guy in particular was pretty open and, would tell you what, he would talk a lot, right? So it was easy to get him to talk about his situation, what his beliefs were, and all that kind of thing. He wasn't pushy about it at all, but very forthcoming, and I was a curious human. So their guru, this guy named Muktananda, his thing was about meditation. That was the key thing. Meditation was the key to enlightenment. That was kind of the main part of his message, I guess. That's probably kind of, oversimplifying and kind of, well, whatever. I don't mean any disrespect to him and any of that, but that's just sort of like an oversimplified thing. Just kind of, I can put a label on it and, whatever. But our neighbor would talk to me about it, and I even went to their ashram and went and chanted and listened to stuff. It was a bit like going to church, except for we sat on the floor. They did chanting as opposed to singing. You know what I mean? It was an interesting thing. It was a different vibe. And the talks weren't so much a preacher. They were like a person would be up in the front, but they would be like on a slightly raised, I don't know what you call it, I can't think of the word. So like a little platform, they'd be a little bit higher than everybody else, so they could kind of see over everybody else, but not that much. And they would just kind of be giving a talk. And it was very, very informal by comparison to church. I don't know, I found it appealing. But, yeah, I mean, it was not enough that, I wouldn't join the, or anything like that. But, I found going there, I don't know, yeah, it was cool. It was a positive experience. It was also about that time is when my mom loaned me her copy for pretty much an indefinite, loan, I guess. She eventually did retake possession of it. Her copy of Lao Tzu, Tao Te Ching. And that was pretty impactful on me as well as a young human. And then, of course, listening to, through high school and into junior college and the like, I was very interested in a lot of Eastern religion / philosophy, to include Buddhism, aspects of Hinduism and Taoism. I mean, those would be the big three. Largely, Alan Watts had a lot to do with that, frankly. There are others that I have listened to over the years. I don't know. I don't really. Yeah, nobody's really coming to mind right now, but it doesn't really matter. So I've been curious about those types of ways of viewing the world, and I even kind of borrow concepts from them, or I guess maybe I should just more accurately say steal, because I'm taking them and using them for my own purposes, and so I'll use concepts and words from places, but it's been filtered through my being, you know what I mean, like my understanding of things and whatnot. So it probably would be slightly different than a practitioner of any given religion's view on it, you know what I mean? So I don't know. Like I don't know. One thing that comes to my mind is karma, right? For me, karma has no actual way on, like a good evil thing, right? It's really just to do with, like, the way you interact with the world it's a system, right? You can't escape the fact that you interact with the world, right? So if you do things with certain kinds of behaviors, certain sorts of things will result from those behaviors. So I guess, it doesn't quite fit in with because I don't believe in reincarnation, so I guess that's the deal. So my notion of karma is going to be very, very different, say, from, a Hindu's version of karma, especially in how it relates, because since I don't believe in reincarnation, right? So I suppose a couple of things that are, I guess, I don't know why I should say centrally important to my religion, maybe. But that it needs to be dynamic, first of all, right? Because my view of the world has mostly been sort of a scientific thing. Even when I was a kid, I was very kind of curious about science and all of that, science and technology and sci-fi and, the whole thing, right? But one aspect that I find really appealing about science is that it allows you to not be pinned down to something if it turns out that the thing you're pinned down to is in fact an error, right? I said this in a number of places, so I think maybe it bears repeating, is that I reserve the right to change my mind about anything at any given time. If I get new information that leads me to believe that what I used to think was wrong, then not only should I, from a standpoint of like just to not be wrong, but it's like if you don't improve, like if you just got new information that says, oh, that was what you used to think was wrong, then not changing the way you think of the world in accordance with that new information is kind of just willful ignorance and kind of willfully stupid. You know what I mean? You're asking for something bad to happen because you're just not, trying to adapt to new information. And I know that, I catch myself being stubborn at times when somebody will say a thing and I won't be really thinking clearly. I'll just be responding, more out of some kind of, I don't know, usually it's when I'm angry or something. I can't think of a good example right now, but, when it's angry, when I'm angry, I find it difficult to change my mind about anything in particular, It's but see, that's one of those things that is down to a behavioral thing, I guess, is part of my religion, is if I catch myself being stubborn, it's like I kind of berate myself a little bit, like, dude, why do you stop being stubborn? It's like that's not helping the situation. I try to be mindful of, when I'm screwing up so that I can maybe catch myself and prevent myself from screwing up. Now, that doesn't make me a saint or anything. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty far away from a saint. And my aspiration or my goal isn't to be better than anybody else, right? It's to be better than myself in the past. I can look back on my history as a being and I can see things that, where I feel guilt, because I can look back and say, man, that was, a pretty horrible thing to have done. And it's like, okay, well, the use of guilt is to signal to you that the thing that you did was wrong, right? That somehow, for whatever reason, in that context, you shouldn't have been doing that, right? So in the future, don't do it again, right? So I try to, let things go as well, because you don't want to cling to things, right? There's that, I'm sure I've told this before too, and I'll screw it up, but it comes from a lecture from Alan Watts from who knows how, I don't know, maybe even back in the 70s or something. And it's about these two monks, and they come to this stream, and they're looking to try to get across the stream, and they figure, well, they can't find a bridge or anything like that, so they're going to have to just find the shallowest place that seems like they'll get the least wet, and just hike up their robes and wade across. And as they're getting ready to wade across, a young woman turns up and she's, dressed real nice, and she's, oh my goodness, I'm going to get all messy and wet. And so one of the monks says, well, get on my back, I'll give you a piggyback ride. And so he gets her on his back, and he hikes up his robe, and he wades across the thing and sets her down, when they get to the other side. And, they part ways, and she says thank you, and they say, of course, and blah, 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 right? And then they, all go on their merry way. And after some time, the monk that didn't give the lady the piggyback ride stops his pal, and he says, hey, brother, we're not supposed to be, we're not supposed to touch women, right? We're supposed to have this, no touching of the women. It's part, one of our oaths or whatever. And the other monk looks over at him and goes, yeah, I suppose you're right, but I set her down back there, man. Why are you still carrying her, right? You know what I'm saying? It's I really like that story. So I try to remind myself that there are times that some things aren't worth hanging on to, not to say that I'm successful about any of that. Again, I'm not any kind of a saint or whatever. It's like, it's I'm so far away from a saint, it's ridiculous. But again, I'm trying to look at my life in such a way that, I don't know, I just have this, it's not, I wouldn't call it really a hunger per se, but I just sort of feel like this kind of like urging, like it's an instinct or something that to keep doing, to keep understanding better, It's like I think it's like maybe even part of our survival mechanism, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, the more you understand what's going on around you, especially if you think back to our ancient ancestral past, when we didn't have buildings and automobiles and guns and the like, and we're using things like pointy sticks and ad-ladles and rocks, and that's how we're getting around in the world, right? There's a lot of predators that are pretty good at being sneaky, right? You know what I mean? So it would, behoove us as not the most badass. We're super badass when we have our tools and stuff, and we can, bring technology to bear. We're, pretty much invincible, well, kind of. But, you just sort of catch us, off guard or without leveraging our technology appropriately, and we're not as badass as, some of us may think. A big cat sneaks up on you and oops, your dinner, right? But if you're good at learning about your surroundings and understanding like where you can be safe and where you have to be careful and, all of that kind of thing, right? I think it's something that we're sort of bred into, that I think a lot of us have this sort of natural longing desire to kind of just understand the world better, Now, whether that manifests itself as a religious behavior or scientific behavior or whatever, it's, I don't know, it's your call. And maybe you don't feel like that at all, I don't know. But I guess that's the gist of, I suppose in just broad strokes, the role of my religion, right, is to just sort of give me some bearing. And, well, maybe bearing is part of it, right? But that's the thing, is it does basically, it's me trying to function. Me trying to figure out what's the best way for me to function, right? That's really what my religion is for me. And it's an ongoing thing that will never end, right? It's I tend to think of it as a practice, right? I don't mean like rehearsal, I mean practice, right? It's a thing that you do, right? I'm sure I've talked about this before, but like I'm going to talk about like in terms of musicianship, right? There are things that you do that are part of the practice of being a musician, right? So and a lot of that has to do with, keeping your hands on the instrument, right? So that you can operate it appropriately, right? Whether that's, running scales, or if you have to do things about breathing, if you're a singer or play woodwinds or the like, For your guitarist or keyboard player, a lot of times that there are finger exercises we do, especially as we get older and have to do with more to do with flexibility than strength and, you know, these types of things. See, these are practice to my mind because they have to do with being a musician, right? But when you're doing things for a performance, I think of that as rehearsal, right? You see what I'm saying? That for me, there's two different things. Practice is the thing that you do to be a musician, and rehearsals are preparatory for a specific event, if that makes sense. So I suppose ritualistic things would be, you know, performances that you might do a rehearsal for, like a rehearsal wedding, or not the, you know, the wedding rehearsal, I guess is what you say. You know, and that sort of thing. But otherwise, for me, my religion is my practice, right? It's the thing that I do in order to be a human. You know, I don't know. Does that make any sense? Well, you know, this is going to be a fairly short video. I hope that gives some of you guys an idea about where I come from with, you know, some of my perspectives. I'll get more detailed about maybe some of my whimsical notions about, you know, cosmology and, you know, any of that kind of nonsense. But yeah, I'm going to leave this here for now. Well, I guess that's it. Be cool, and aloha, siblings.